Welcome back to the FanSpeak Network and another episode of Sibling Showdown. Best ball, of course, we are talking all best ball as much as we can through this spring, right up until the BBM is launched right after the NFL draft. And that's what we're focusing on is the NFL draft and these rookies. We've been going position by position, looking at the rookies and trying to see which rookies we want to target in the big board drafts on Underdog. Of course, if you are new to Underdog, use code drafters or Underdog, use code FANSPEAK. You get 100% deposit bonus up to $100. So come join us in the Underdog Fantasy streets. And right now, of course, there's the big board, the pre-draft big contest with, I believe, 200,000 up top to first place. And so that's what we're drafting right now. And that's what we are focusing on the rookies to target right now. So we've done quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends. We did part one of wide receivers. This is part two of wide receivers. These are the guys that are going to go, probably end of the first round, second round, third round that we may want to target. That could be the Jaden Reeds of last year that we can really, Jaden Reed was on the winning BBM4 team. So these could be these guys that you could get later potentially in best ball drafts that can really make an impact. And this is a loaded wide receiver class. So I'm joined by my brother, Steve, of course, each and every week to talk about these rankings. Steve, I know this is a wide receiver class that you love. You've talked about it last show. It's elite and it's deep and it's huge. It's a very impactful wide receiver class. So remind the people why you love the wide receiver class so much. And of course, how are you doing? How are you doing in the best ball streets?
Yeah, no, first time doing best ball streets. It's obviously an interesting time. Baseball is only a couple of weeks away. So been working a lot of baseball drafts, but definitely doing the big board, number of big board drafts as well, getting ready for all this. This is the time, we just had the combine, we have free agency around the corner. So we're starting to see guys get cut. We're starting to see guys get re-signed. Dalton Schultz just re-signed. So that was kind of one of the first big offensive weapons. Mike Evans re-signed. So we now know he's back in Tampa. So these types of things, they iron out where, we should value these guys. But yeah, speaking of the combine, it just really went to show how talented this receiver group is. Last year's receiver class, very underwhelming, yet we still had some fantasy, really good fantasy guys. Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison in the first round. JSN was good, just obviously the opportunity wasn't there with DK and Lockett in front of them. And then, of course, second round, Jaden Reed. Third round, Rashee Rice, and of course, Puka Nacua late. Yeah. But, it just goes to show that, opportunity matters, but guys who are refined, like a guy like Jaden Reed or Rashee Rice, who can come in and, find a role in an offense, can make an impact early. And like you said, Reed was on the winning team for BBM. So it help the guy win a lot of money.
Right. And we talked about this last week. And again, check out the wide receivers part one show, a couple programming notes, but the first one is check out the wide receivers part one show. Cause I think it was really good because it talked about obviously what rookie wide receivers are going the top 100 of best ball drafts so far. And these are all guys that are definitely going to be almost definitely going to be going in the first round of the real NFL draft. And there's a lot of impact there, but Steve made a really good point last week that, you really want to pay attention to not just because their draft, whatever their draft value capital is, does not necessarily reflect what it'll be in best ball. And certainly that's why we might want to take a look at values. Like last week, you talked about Roma Dunze, who goes more like 50s, 60s ADP. Yeah. While you love Marvin Harrison, you may like the value on a Dunze more just because of the price you're getting to pay. Similar with like you said, like Rashee Rice and Jaden Reed, they came in and made an impact right away, way more so than first round, in real life, first round, Quentin Johnson was terrible and still then that because he went in the first round, that of course pushed his best ball stock up. You didn't want to touch Quentin Johnson last year. And that's with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen going down during the year. Wow. That's how bad he was. So, these are things that you really have to consider. And you talked about some things last week. Could you quickly refresh what you talked about last week as to kind of like some markers that you look at to avoid the Quentin Johnsons and target the Jaden Reeds of the world?
Yeah. So just a couple of things. One, first, just kind of stemming off the Roma Dunze point, is I was making it not just the Marvin Harrison, but Malik Neighbors is going kind of in the low 30s. and Odunze is going essentially 2 rounds later in the mid 50s. So you're getting a guy who roughly they're considered tied in the draft community. Behind they're considered 2A, 2B in terms of behind wide receivers behind Marvin Harrison Jr. So they're both projected to be easy top 10 picks. It could end up being Odunze. Some team falls in love with Odunze, wants his profile more than Neighbors. So you're getting a big value jump there for essentially the same what the NFL is essentially saying is the same value type player. So that's the type of thing that you look at, and it was on perfect display last year where you had JSN even after we knew that he went to Seattle, where we knew the landing spot was crowded. He was going in the 30s, and you had Jordan Addison going in the 50s. Where yes, I mean Justin Jefferson was there, but that was only Justin Jefferson,
right?
There's
2 guys ahead of JSN.
Yeah, we weren't afraid of Osborne stealing a lot of targets from Addison. So, and an even more example, which I definitely wasn't as on, but in terms of like JSN finding a role in a 3-man race at wide receiver, that was the same situation with, say, Zay Flowers. And Zay Flowers was competing and going in the like 80s, 90s for much of the best ball, off season last year. And so again, you're getting 60 spot value for essentially the same type of role, in what was a very high powered offense. So, it just really did not make sense. Even though JSN was the number 1 receiver drafted and all that, it just did not make sense to see that kind of value jump between, guys who are taking 3 spots difference in the NFL draft.
Right, but talk also, and that's a good point. Talk about kind of what we talked about last week. How you said from the right, and listen, we're not always right and we're not always wrong, but there were plenty of things that I think we did right last year. And from the jump, we were staying off Quentin Johnson. We weren't very high on JSN, but we were very interested in guys like Jaden Reed, rookies like that. And I personally wasn't on Puka real late, and that was a mistake. But my point is, there were some early guys that we stayed off. That was correct. There were some guys going later, like Jaden Reed and Rice, that we were on. That was correct. And those kind of things are majorly helpful. You made a good point about like draft stock and value, but talk about like kind of those factors you look for to avoid. Like a couple years ago, Traylon Burks, Quentin Johnson last year, that you can kind of be like, they may be going in high in real NFL drafts, but I'm going to stay away from them.
Yeah, no. And, and I didn't even mention him last year, but another guy who had a ton of buzz last year was Jalen Hyatt. I was off that the whole time. Yeah. And, he went to the Giants, and sure, they theoretically had a wide open receiver room, but he was a 3rd round pick. So didn't even get the major draft capital, and he was just a raw guy. I mean, just ran fast. That's all he could do.
People were enamored by his speed.
And Tennessee, that could work because they it was just is an offense that could scheme it open, but the NFL is just different. He didn't have a full route tree. He wasn't going to, hurt defenses any other way. And sure, he had a couple of long balls throughout the year, but that's about it. You knew that it was going to be a multi-year project for him. And so, yeah, maybe you were going to get 1 or 2 spike weeks from him at best. And, I think we got 1. So, for a while there, he was going like in the 120s. I mean, he was going real high. So, yeah, I mean, it, it just kind of goes to show with Quentin Johnson, same kind of thing. He was very limited in what he could do. He could do very well at TCU, but he was very limited in what he could do. And even though he went to the best situation playing with Justin Herbert, high-powered offense in Chargers, obviously he had a lot of competition. And even though that opened up with Mike Williams' injury early, Jordan Palmer injury throughout most of the year, and of course late Keenan Allen, it just didn't matter. He just didn't have the talent to play. I mean, they were throwing out guys off the street ahead of him. So,
and so basically, you had kind of said last week, like, kind of look to avoid like a crowded room for high draft capital. That was JSN. B, in the case of like a Quentin Johnson, Jalen Hyatt year before, Traylon Burks, try to avoid like the one trick ponies, basically. Like it's a speed guy, or it's just like this type of route guy, and that's it. Just a bubble screen guy. Like if it's a one, and I understand Flowers could. That's why I stayed off of Flowers honestly until the very end, and then I got some shares of Flowers at the very end because I was worried about that. I was like, is he just like that, like kind of gadgety, like McCole Hardman? Yeah, I don't know, like bubble screen type guy, and how is he going to really be used? And it turns out I was wrong for most of draft season. He was used more effectively, and you could have gotten value on him if you would have drafted him earlier. So that was when I was wrong. But in the other cases, there are these guys where just watch on the one trick pony thing, right? I mean, if you care to elaborate on that.
Absolutely, and especially when their draft stock, and this is the other thing, is especially when their draft stock's inflated due to them being drafted high. I mean, if you want to take a shot on, that kind of guy like super late, last round, maybe they do, have more in the tank, and the team sees it throughout camp and preseason, and then instead of like Tank Dell is a perfect example of that. Like people thought he was a one trick pony. People thought he was essentially the same thing as gadget guy, very undersized, 5'7", 170, and yet before he got injured, he was obviously very talented. So but he showed in camp, he showed in the preseason that he had a role in that team.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's just important to pay it, and we'll keep going through this all season because again, we're doing all these rankings now, pre-draft, and then we'll do it all again post-draft in May on the landing spots, and then how does that affect where we're ranking these guys for like the BBM 5 and of course all of best ball season. So we'll do this all again, but it's important to do it kind of twice, once before and once after. So this kind of will conclude the wide receivers. And so we'll really just do like these second or end of first, second, third round guys. And then, we'll dive a little deeper after the draft to find like, is there some, Puka Nakuas of this year that went later in the draft, or going really late in best ball drafts that, could be insane immense value. So we'll definitely address that more after draft. A couple other programming notes. Of course, as I mentioned, if you're new to Underdog, use code FANSPEAK for 100% deposit bonus. Because like Steve said, there's baseball drafts right now for baseball season. Spread just did a NBA playoff best ball draft on the channel today. So check that out if you're into the NBA best ball playoff best ball streets. Check out Spread's show. That was really good. And then obviously we're going to do these rankings, but soon we're going to be doing more strategy shows, live drafts, bringing on more guests and that kind of stuff. It's going to be a really fun draft season. So use code Underdog. Also check out any of our articles on fanspeak.com. Most of what we cover here we'll do on fanspeak.com written. I just got something up about the quarterback free agents landing spots and what are attractive, what aren't. Obviously we'll find out the landing spots next week on that and then can make decisions from there. But check that out. Steve will be doing more rankings to supplement this right now. He's keeping up with all his transactions on Ultimate GM. So also to that is another, I guess you could say, Fanspeak programming note. If you want to check out our articles on Fanspeak, but you also want to use like our draft simulator and free agency simulator, and it just runs your whole off season basically and gets no ads on Fanspeak, you can subscribe to Ultimate GM on Fanspeak. He's keeping up with all the data on that right now because this is just crazy free agency time of cuts and restructures, and then all, of course, the signings next week. So wild times. Be sure to, again, check out all that Fanspeak articles, Spreads NBA show, all of our content here, like and subscribe. And now let's get into the wide receivers. So we left off with, I believe, Troy Franklin, who I don't think had the best combine. Do you actually see the combine being so bad for Franklin that he could fall into the second round of the real NFL draft, or do you think he'll still go first round?
So I do think there's a chance that he falls in the second round just because there are so many other guys who had amazing combines.
We'll talk about them here,
And we're about to talk about these guys. But I still think it's likely he ends up in the first round, especially just because so many teams at the end of the first round, Chiefs, Bills, a handful of others absolutely could use. Cowboys could take a shot at a receiver. More than a few could go receiver at the end of round one.
Yeah. So we covered 6 receivers that were kind of definitely round one guys, and that was through the top 100. Now we're going to pick up where we left off, and of course we taped that as the combine was starting. Now we have the combine information for these guys that will go well, they're going after 100, pick 100 in the best ball streets. And these first few could sneak in the first round. So we'll start with Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. Now projected ADP is 111. So you could tell us about his combine, him as a prospect, and then I'll get kind of your take on how you're handling him in best ball.
Yeah, so Adonai Mitchell, actually very interesting guy. He was at Georgia. He actually had the chance with Texas being in the playoffs to win national championship 3 years in a row. Had they beaten Washington, obviously gone on to beat Michigan, but transferred to Texas to get a kind of more open passing offense, especially with Stetson Bennett moving on, and he really blossomed. He had a really nice year. Was kind of 1A, 1B with Xavier Worthy, who we'll be talking about very shortly, in this Texas offense. And also we talked about Jatavion Sanders at tight end. So they potent weapons. I mean, Quinn Ewers is an average quarterback, not anything super special, but it's a good offense. And he's a big physical receiver. I think he measured in around like 6'2", 6'3", but blazing fast. He ran like a low 4.3, did incredible in the jumps, just really strong across the board. And this is what we saw. I mean, we knew he's a jump ball guy, deep threat guy. He still needs some refinement, but he's a guy who's going to go get the ball. Quarterbacks are going to love him because he goes up and get it. He's physical at the point of attack. It's going to be a red zone weapon. It's going to be a massive deep threat. If you need a deep ball receiver, he's one of these top guys that you want in this draft class.
So you don't see him being a one-trick pony at all?
No. And, he's got plenty of experience. And also
two good programs.
In two very good programs. Played, SEC for a couple years. And then, of course, Big 12, lesser competition, but in the playoffs. So a lot of big games, stuff like that. So I just like that he has got a lot of experience, and I think he's good. I mean, yes, I mean, he needs some refinement, and that's what separates him from some of the guys we talked about last show, and why he's not going. I mean, he's got the physical traits to be an elite weapon on the outside. Like, he can be a game breaker, but he just needs some refinement for sure. So. But is a team drafting him as, let's say, like a number 2 weapon? Absolutely, he can make an impact as a rookie.
Okay, and so I
think George Pickens.
Okay, all right, yeah. NFL comps are always fun for me. I always that's how I kind of, because I don't watch a lot of football on Saturdays. I'm NFL 365 girl, and I'll casually watch college football, and then this time of year I'll of course watch clips and that kind of stuff as the hype for the draft and these rookies is going up for best ball. But that it helps me when I'm not watching football all Saturday, every Saturday in the fall, to give a little NFL comp. So George Pickens, that seems pretty good to me. So at ADP, the follow-up question for all these guys is going to be at their ADP. Where do you stand on them at ADP of 111? Where do you stand on Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely moved up a little bit. In fact, Keenan Coleman was the next receiver when we did this week, but because of the combine that Mitchell had, he's jumped him, obviously. But I like him in this range. I mean, you're having Mike Williams coming off the injury. You Khalil Shakir, who right now is penciled in as the Bills' number 2 receiver.
Yeah, he's still in 3. Yeah.
But like I said, Buffalo's probably grabbing a receiver. You have Marquise Brown, who is a free agent, who kind of coming off his own injury. So, Mitchell is high upside, and if he gets he could get one of these landing spots like the Bills, like the Chiefs. So, I mean, he could end up with one of the top quarterbacks in the league.
Right. Another thing to keep in mind is, we're using this in the context of the big board drafts, which obviously everybody's drafting from, Super Bowl to draft time for the big board drafts. And then we'll all be armed with more information as we go into the BBMs and all the other different best ball draft options. But something that Underdog does every year, or has done, I really believe, the past couple of years, that we love, and I think is going to be released in the next couple of weeks is their rookie sophomore draft. So you can also apply this to the rookie sophomore drafts, which are coming up. And you and I are going to definitely rip some live rookie sophomore drafts on here, and I'm super excited. Hopefully it's coming in the next couple of weeks. So, okay. So that's Adonai Mitchell, ADP 111. Next is Keon Coleman, who you said was originally next, now ADP of 117. So tell us about Coleman, the prospect.
Yeah. So Coleman, he started his career at Michigan State, transferred to Florida State this past year. So got to play with Jordan Travis before Travis got injured. Florida State, very talented team. So, the ball didn't get as hyper-focused to any one or two players. So his raw numbers aren't as robust as some of these other prospects, but good. And he definitely showed that he's a very talented receiver. Kind of similar in terms of size profile as St. Mitchell, but he does not have the near athletic traits that Mitchell does. So that definitely holds him back a little bit. And I think one of the reasons why you see Mitchell jump him here, what Coleman does have is he's a much better route runner. He's way more refined in that area. He reminds me a little bit in this. I mean, he's bigger than him, but he reminds me a little bit of Jordan Addison last year, who came in as, to me, one of the more refined route runners in the class. And I think we saw that. We saw that even though he did not have, he didn't have the fastest 40 time, Jordan Addison was just ready to play. So I think Keon Coleman fit will probably matter a bit more for him than some of these other guys, because I think he needs to go in the right offense. He needs to be used correctly. He's not going to be a guy who's, I think, going to be an effective deep threat. But red zone, he's going to be effective. I think middle, intermediate routes, he's going to be very effective. Chain moving guy. So I think in the right fit, he can absolutely be a very good fantasy asset. But he's just not going to be a blazing fast guy. He's not going to break, 60-yard touchdowns, anything of that nature.
Gotcha. So again, follow-up question for you is, now that he's, dropped down a little bit under Mitchell, he's going, of course, near Mitchell. Mitchell was 111. He's 117. ADP 117. How are you handling him? He's going near Xavier Worthy, obviously the fastest combine, hit the record for the fastest combine score, and we'll get into that in a minute. So he's going around a couple other rookies, guys like Lockett, Shakir, and Mike Williams. So how are you handling Coleman?
So right now, I definitely have some shares already, but right now I'm probably going to wait and see if he slides a little bit more, because I do, like I said, I thought he'd maybe be a little bit more athletic. So that surprised me a little bit. His play speed definitely seems to be better than his real speed, which, again, like Addison, is fine, though he tested worse than Addison. So I'll let him see if he slides a little bit until we get a landing spot. So right now I'm probably slightly passing on him. With a few guys, below him right now ahead of him. But if he slides and it's like 8-10 picks past ADP, I'm taking him.
Okay, and that leads us to our next guy that was the talking point of the NFL Combine, and that, of course, is Xavier Worthy from Texas, who ran a 4.21 40-yard dash, breaking the Combine record. So tell us about the new Combine record 40-yard dash holder of Xavier Worthy. Obviously, a very impressive Combine that I'm sure went up draft boards both in the NFL and here in best ball streets. He's now going at an ADP of 119. I can't remember what he was before the Combine, but I do believe, I'm sure that's gone up. So tell us about him as the prospect, and then we'll talk about his ADP more.
Yeah, so the first thing to keep in mind with Xavier Worthy is he led Texas in receiving. He's actually done so for the last 3 years, I believe. So, he's been very productive at Texas, and multi-year guy. So this is not a one-year wonder. He's also, yes, he does rely some on manufactured touches, bubble screens, things of that nature. But we know why. I mean, he's so electric with the ball in his hands. We've seen that not just in receiving, but in punt returns, things of that nature. He's been incredible in that area as well in his college career. So, yeah, I mean, a 4.21, absolutely fantastic. He also had some great jumps. this guy is speed for days. We see this with guys like Jalen Waddle. We see this with obviously Tyreek Hill. That kind of speed. It's so dangerous. It's tough to just match up to. And if you're creative with it, if you're smart with it, it can just put so much stress on a defense. And
Yeah. We
people
saw what
will.
the Dolphins do with their speed.
Yeah,
If more teams
absolutely.
start, getting guys like Worthy and used effectively, speed can kill in the NFL for sure. Yeah.
And that is a big reason, Zay Flowers, that's why he was effective with the Ravens. And I kind of comped Xavier Worthy similar to Zay Flowers kind of coming into the combine. And I mean, he's obviously even faster than Zay Flowers.
What did Flowers run last year?
I think Flowers, I'd have to look, but Flowers was just, I know he had with very quick drills. I don't know if his 40 time was super electric, but just a guy who reminded me so dangerous on bubble screens, short slants, who could get so many yards after the catch. I mean, that's Worthy's game. He can definitely go deep also. I think he needs to do that a little bit more. But no, I mean, I think Worthy can be just a massive weapon for a team. And like I said, he's refined. I mean, he's been very productive for 3 years. This is not a guy who barely played. The one thing I do want to note is, excuse me, the people will knock his weight, like the
I was just going to
165.
ask you about his weight because when I saw his interviews, I was like, "Oh my God, good Lord!" And he's in the 160s.
Yeah.
BMI percentage very low. I mean, this guy is definitely a slim build and thin. And I was, just wondering, I know there's guys like Devonta Smith and other guys in the NFL, Waddle to a certain extent, that are, Deshaun Jackson of old, that are just speed guys that are smaller, and that's okay. Do you worry about his weight at all?
So what I will say is, yes, part of the issue is, unlike say Tank Dell last year was like 170, but he was like 5'8", or like Santana Moss, he was like 172 or something like that, and he was like 5'9". Worthy is actually 5'11", so he's got a little bit more build. He can actually,
he's lean, yeah,
he could actually put on a little bit more muscle. So he probably will end up, when it's all said and done, probably play closer to like 180. I wouldn't be surprised,
Okay.
And my guess is he'd probably cut weight a little bit to trying to run the fastest 40 time. I mean, guys do that all the time, and I don't think that's too shocking at all. I mean, the speed's there. The speed, it's not like we didn't see the speed in watching games of Texas. I mean,
Right.
He's so electric on the field.
Right. Okay. So basically, you're not worried at all. You think he's going to put on weight. You're not worried at all, because you saw the game speed and you saw how he held up, and for 3 years being a productive starter for 3 years.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, he got knocked out of a few games, but took some bad hits. But I mean, again, that can be a lot of guys. And when you're doing bubble screens, when you're doing punt returns, I mean, we saw that with Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed got hit multiple times, on punt returns, on things like that. End arounds, when you're utilized like that. We saw that with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. I mean, they get utilized, they're slimmer builds and they get utilized in exposed ways. You're going to take some bad hits sometimes.
right.
But again, that speed component is just so dynamic.
So dangerous in the NFL. Yeah. So, and again, especially if he does land with a coach, not saying he's going to land with Miami, but if he lands with a coach like a Mike McDaniel that knows how to use the speed even more effectively.
Or Andy Reid, who had that with Tyreek Hill.
Right, exactly. That could be ultra dangerous, of course, with Patrick Mahomes. So ADP of 119 right now, going near those other rookies, that we just talked about in Coleman and Mitchell, and around these other guys that we've already talked about, and another rookie that I'm, very interested in coming up that we'll talk about next. So how are you handling Worthy? This is just a group of a lot of talented rookies. How are you handling your exposure to Worthy right now?
I actually liked Worthy more than Mitchell coming into the combine, just because I think Worthy can do a little bit more all around. I think Mitchell is going to be very touchdown or bust reliant, like from his fantasy profile. So if he goes to a team that, like the Bills or the Chiefs, and they're going to throw a lot of touchdowns, he's going to be really good, because he's going to get a good percentage of those. But if he goes to a bad offense like Carolina and they throw 12 touchdowns all year, even if he gets 8 of them, like he'd need to get 8 of them to to be fantasy relevant. Where Worthy could just rack up catches, get end of rounds, just get utilized in more ways. So I'm fine with Worthy here. I really am. I think I think he's going to end up late first, very early second. He's going in the top 40 picks, and I think very likely going to be an impact guy.
So sounds like you at cost you like Worthy even better than Keon Mitchell and Adonai Mitchell, or Keon Coleman and Adonai Mitchell. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, right now they're so close. Like before the combine, there was a bigger gap, but Worthy's really jumped up. Worthy, I think, jumped up like 20 spots or something.
Yeah.
So
right. So you think that's warranted, the jump?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is where I think he should have been. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So you were taking him and you are taking him at this price,
Yeah.
basically. Okay, well then now take us to our next rookie, Lad McConkey from Georgia, ADP 126. His ADP has already skyrocketed. This was a rookie receiver that, right after the season was probably projected, third, fourth round receiver. Yeah. And certainly not on people's radars as much here in these best ball drafts. Well, I guess they were, because where he really made a jump was Senior Bowl week. And that's the name you heard over and over and over about his route running and watching him from Senior Bowl tape. So, now he has just skyrocketed, seems like each week of these big board drafts. And then he had another one who had a good combine. I mean, watching the gauntlet drills where they just catch and go. I mean, it was incredibly impressive. So I've been taking him above ADP and not caring in some drafts because, I know some of your comps for him are, quite glowing. I'll let you get into that. But I think he looks like a guy that can make an absolute year one impact. So tell me about Lad McConkey, the prospect first.
Yeah, so Lad McConkey, Georgia guy. I mean, part of the reason why Adonai Mitchell left Georgia is because Lad McConkey is going to be Brock Bowers is kind of the number one guy there, and Lad McConkey is going to be the number one receiver there. So, Mitchell left Georgia because McConkey's there, and only so much passing go around on this team. And yeah, I mean, he's so talented. He's fat. He incredible route runner, incredible hands. And the speed is there. I mean, he ran a sub 4.4. Obviously not as big as like a Adonai Mitchell. But
I was to say, what's his size?
I think he measured like 5'11".
Okay.
Because his measurable comps, and this is what the Compton, if you watch the combine, was his comps in terms of measure height, weight, speed, and I think some of his jumps were right on par with Garrett Wilson.
Oh, that's right. I saw it it was like duplicate. It was literally like carbon copy almost. Yeah.
So, that is about as good of a thing you can get. My personal comp for him, even though, I mean, he can be used outside, is he's just such a smooth route runner and such a fantastic operator. He reminds me a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, I think because he can be utilized outside more, he can give you more than that. Like, I mean, in some ways, he could be CD Lamb.
Wow.
Not as
the comps are blowing my mind now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not as tall as CD Lamb, obviously, but just that kind of guy who is just CD Lamb is just a very good route runner, just always getting open. Gets yards after the catch, can go deep, can kills in the intermediate. Kills in the screen game because he's so smart with the ball in his hands after catching it. I mean, he can do a lot.
I mean, now, you're talking in the comps about, like you said, the height, weight, speed comps, Garrett Wilson, you're comping him to essentially maybe a smaller CD Lamb or an Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's like all three of those, and again, this guy was a guy that maybe after the season, third or fourth round, now it's like, no, he's going to go end of first. Yeah. And it's like end of first. Now you're talking about teams that were playoff teams last year. So, oh, by the way, he probably is going to get like a plush landing spot with a really good quarterback. Yeah. So that makes it even more attractive. And that's why the comps, obviously watching his tape from the Senior Bowl and Combine, but then realizing the potential landing spots is like, it's like check, and I've been drafting him above ADP kind of this entire time. I mean, to a certain extent, ADP 126 to me, still fine drafting him above that. Where you stand?
Yeah, no, I'm with you there because yeah, very good chance he goes to a good situation. Even if he doesn't, he's so refined. Like even if he
Hmm.
goes to Carolina at the top of round two, look what Adam Thielen did last year, and he's got obviously way more juice than 36-year-old Adam Thielen.
Right.
Adam Thielen was, with all of Carolina's issues, I can't remember where he ended up fantasy wise, but it was
Yeah.
like top 25 wide
Right.
receiver.
Right.
So um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
still I still really think he's going to go end of first round. So hopefully it isn't to the Panthers. No
yeah,
offense to them, but or like you said, maybe they trade up and a
yeah,
team like the Panthers could land him. But hopefully it is like a really good landing spot to one of these playoff teams. So yeah, I'm drafting him often. He's going to be one I target in rookie sophomore drafts for sure. And yeah, still ADP isn't high enough here. So yeah,
yeah. The
go ahead.
one knock I'll say is he has gotten banged up each of the last 2 years, so
Mhm.
like he's probably a little bit more injury prone than some of these other guys. But other than that,
Has he had
yeah,
serious injuries that he's dealt with, or is it more like the
um,
soft tissues type stuff?
yeah, no, I mean nothing like serious that like that I can recall, but just things that have kept him out. But it hasn't hurt his route running. It hasn't hurt his ability to process the game. So I don't think it's a big issue.
Okay. Um, okay, so next, what are we looking at? Who the next one down? Roman Wilson, right? Would be the next
Yeah.
rookie at
Yep.
ADP of 151. So talk to me about Roman Wilson, the prospect, but also um obviously, of course, we'll discuss who he's going around. But tell me about him as a prospect and where do you think he'll go in the real NFL draft?
So Roman Wilson, I actually wouldn't be surprised if he slides a little bit later in the real
Mhm.
NFL draft than a couple of the next receivers we'll end up
Mhm.
talking about. But probably still early third at the latest, maybe late round two. Obviously from Michigan, so national championship, really good all around receiver, ran well, tested well at the combine, just not elite. Like if this was last year, his numbers would be very good.
Mhm.
But just in this class, he just kind of got lost in the mix. And
Mhm.
he he's the guy who actually typically gets like the Amon-Ra St. Brown comps because he's going to
Mhm.
be much more in the slot than outside.
Gotcha.
Um, but another great route runner, fine guy. He's going to come into the NFL, make a lot of catches early on. Yeah, he's going to get Jaden Reed comps because he's similar in that
Mhm.
regard as well.
Well, I like
Um,
both of those comps too.
yeah, so I mean, I think they're um, obviously hasn't because Michigan did not throw the ball a lot these last couple of years. Just
Yeah.
hasn't gotten a ton of big gaudy stats.
Mhm.
Um, but no, I mean he is a good veteran guy, route running guy. It should be an instant slot starter for a team.
Okay.
But because he's probably going to mainly be a slot guy, I think that keeps him more into the late second, early third round of the real NFL draft. But in the right
Sure.
landing spot, that shouldn't impact his fantasy.
Right. Yeah. Just like Jaden Reed, it actually, could make it more appealing.
Yeah,
Like a Jaden Reed, just because of where he'll fit in on the given team. ADP of 151. Where are you landing with him going around guys like, well, Quentin Johnson, who we just talked about, Michael Wilson, Adam Thielen, Brandon Cooks, Gabe Davis. To me, I mean, really going around, Michael Wilson, Quentin Johnson, Adam Thielen. This seems pretty enticing given who he's going around. How are you landing? I haven't gotten him yet, but
yeah.
or have I? Actually, I might have one share, but anyways, don't have him much yet. But this does seem like one I'd be interested, especially given who he's going around. How are you handling it?
Yeah, I've taken him a couple times. I think it's a fine spot. It is, I think, just a little bit more dictated in the right situation,
Mm-hmm.
right team. Is it going to be a team that utilizes three wide receiver sets a lot? Um, you know, that that can play a role. We saw that with Josh Downs last year,
Mm-hmm.
where he had a couple really nice games, but they just didn't utilize that you know enough. And at the end of the year, he just wasn't getting enough targets to really make a fantasy impact. So it's going to be a little hit or miss depending on what landing spot. But that area, I think there's a lot of upside there. So I'd say it's kind of dependent what you're looking for. If you're looking for upside, go for him, and even over like a Quentin Johnson. But if you're looking for like safety, like an Adam Thielen or probably even a Michael Wilson is probably going to be penciled in as a starter, as like the number 2 in Arizona.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, then let's identify the next rookie would be Xavier Legit. You said he's one that you're probably going to be kind of definitely waiting on the landing spot. And does that go for Jalen Polk as well?
Excuse me. I actually like Polk a little bit more than Xavier Legit. I think.
We'll lump these two together, and since they go so close together, and tell me how you're handling them.
So Polk is much more refined, multi-year starter at Washington, obviously with Penix, just much better offense, much better system. Not on Odunze's level is Polk, but he's a good receiver, can be a number 2 starter in this league, and definitely has some deep ball ability, good size. So just kind of good across the board. Not elite in any area. Not going to be like a all pro, even Pro Bowl type guy, but can be the type of guy who catches 60 balls, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. Absolutely. I think Legit has a little bit more upside, but he's kind of like a 1-year producer at South Carolina, and much more raw physical talent. It's kind of what we talked about at the top of the show. These are the types of guys that if you're getting them at value, it can be great.
Right.
If they show that they can outproduce, like if they're ready. But I just kind of worry, like he might go to a situation where, unless we know that he's going to get a pretty good starting role, I don't know if he's going to be able to earn it himself as a rookie.
Gotcha. So this is just a loaded zone of rookies, because underneath of Legit and Polk, you have was it Malachi Corey and Ricky Parasol. I know Parasol is one you're interested. Corley ADP of 174, Parasol ADP of 175. So we're getting closer to the 200s here. You could deem this as value or not, or do you tell me about these prospects and if you have interest in either?
Yeah, Corley is definitely, he gets comp some to like a Debo, just because he's like a yak guy. He's a yards after catch, get the ball in his hands. He's not Debo, but I mean,
where did Corley go to school?
Oh boy, not Louisiana Tech.
Sorry,
Western Kentucky.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yep. Western Kentucky. Yep.
Yeah. And no, I mean, there's some upside there, but, and, maybe he is this year's Puka Nacua. My guess is he actually is like a clear later 3rd round guy. And again, right landing spot, maybe it fits. But I'm much more interested in Ricky Parasol. Started at Arizona State, went with actually Jaden Daniels, due to COVID and everything. Didn't really get a role there. Went to Florida. Terrible quarterback play there, especially this past year. And but I mean,
so last year he was with Florida.
Yeah. So excellent route runner, excellent hands, just a lot of upside here. And I actually think he's more refined than people give him credit for. His production is going to wow you, but he just hasn't had a lot of good situation around him, unfortunately. I would not be surprised if he kind of is a surprise rookie breakout. Again, kind of needs the right situation, of course, but I think he's gonna impress people in camp. I think he's gonna impress people in preseason
because of how refined he is and not
refined. I mean, he makes some ridiculous highlight catches, athletic, and pretty good route runner. It's just he just needs the opportunity. He just needs a good quarterback play.
Who would you comp him to? Parasol, Ricky Perry.
I mean, he's kind of in the same book. Like he's, I mean, he's just not as good as like a Lad McConkey. I mean, he's kind of similar to like McConkey and that type of receiver, like a
Wilson McConkey.
Yeah. You know,
Okay, so how are you handling them?
I mean, I really like Parasol at this kind of value. I think that's a late round value. I wouldn't be surprised, with his workout. I think some teams are going to like him a little bit more,
Hmm.
um, just because I feel like the upside is really there.
So you could see
Um,
him go in second round in the draft.
yeah, and the guy late second round, so again, could be to a playoff caliber team, good
Sure.
quarterback. If they don't go that way in the first round, and
Hmm.
then maybe they're taking that shot in the second round.
Okay. So Parasol, Rick, you're not as interested in Corley. You are interested. You're a little worried
Corley
that
to me is more dependent on landing spot.
right, and
So
a little worried that he could be a little too raw. And Parasol, you do think is more refined, and think this is a great price. And you've definitely been taking. You definitely want to take shares there.
yeah, because again, the other receivers they're going around at this
Yeah.
point.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
we don't even know where these guys are playing, if they're starting.
Right. Funny
Um,
enough, some of them are the guys that we've talked about, Traylon Burks,
yeah,
Jalen Hyatt, guys that were, these raw
yeah.
type guys from years past. Um, any other rookies that you want to talk about that I can find? Or do
So
you want
the
to talk
last one
about?
that
Okay, go. Sorry.
the last one that I talked about, I think, is the next one, Devontae Walker.
Sure. Okay.
Um,
ADP of 183. Tell me about him as a prospect and how you're handling him.
so unfortunately for his sake, and actually Drake Mays, he's the guy who got um, really screwed by the NCAA this year. They instituted a weird transfer policy
Oh, okay.
after he transferred into UNC, because his second transfer, even though it was due to COVID, and they made him sit out essentially the first, I think it was 6 games, and
Mm,
not practice with the team. So even when after multiple appeals, he was able to come back. Him and May, weren't 100% on the same page. So it wasn't until like late in the year they really got on the same, even come close to being on the same page. So May's most talented receiver, and him playing with by far the most talented quarterback he's ever played with, because he was at Kent State and another smaller school before that. Just wasn't able to have that kind of connection. So unfortunate for him, but we saw at the combine, he didn't have a great Senior Bowl, and he's a little bit more raw, and
okay.
that's the unfortunate thing. But the skill set is absolutely there. He's got size, speed. I think he ran the fourth fastest 40 time. I mean, jumps are amazing. He needs to work on, yeah, catching for sure, and some of his route running. But when him and May kind of got on the same page, he was torching some defenses in the ACC. So, I think you're getting a potential value here. Um, he's going 183. That's very late in this, in these underdog drafts.
Hmm.
And I like the upside. Again, this late in the process compared to the other guys going around him. And
Right.
yes, he's more raw, but he can be a complete receiver. It's not like he's just a one-trick pony. He can be a complete receiver. He just does not have the experience of some of the other guys.
Well, so that's good to keep in mind in these big board drafts. Because I definitely haven't touched him yet, but like to your point, all these guys in this range are more speculative picks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So
I don't have a problem with that. To wrap up, kind of these rookie receivers and ones that we may talk about more once we know landing spot. Because again, we're doing
yeah,
all this all over again after the NFL draft. We will do quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver, probably multiple parts, probably a 3-part series, tight ends, and cover it all based on your landing spot and how we're kind of then really thinking about them, ranking them, and trying to get exposure to them in BBM and all the best ball drafts after the NFL draft. So what are some wide receivers that we haven't talked about today, or of course in part one, that you could see? I'm not saying to try to call it this year's Puka Nakua, but who are just throw out a couple of names of who we may talk about, in the post draft show as guys that we still may consider then once we know their landing spot, if the landing spot's right.
yeah. So a couple guys that I would immediately point to, um, easy to point to, but Brennan Rice, Jerry Rice's son, Javon Baker, UCF, so didn't really have a ton of great quarterback play there. Jalen McMillan, he was kind of the third fiddle in Washington, but talented receiver there. And probably the last two I'd say is Jacob Cowing from mainly Arizona, and but fast, good speed guy. And then Luke McCaffrey. That's obviously a familiar name.
That's pretty familiar. Yeah.
And he's a guy who came into college as a quarterback. Unfortunately, he tried to stick with that for probably way too long, because he really has only played receiver, I think, kind of like these last 2 years. But he looked good at Senior Bowl week. He ran well at the combine. He's another guy who looked great in the gauntlet.
Mm-hmm.
His brother catches the ball pretty well, and his dad caught the ball really well. So, if you're looking for a Puka Nacua, a guy who can run routes perfectly and catch the ball perfectly,
what's McCaffrey's size like compared to like a Puka, or like what's his size? What was his size speed at the combine?
I'd have to look. I can't remember what exactly he measured. I want to say he was 6'1", maybe.
Okay.
6 foot. I can't remember exactly.
I was going to look that up really quick just to see. But do you remember any of his like speed stuff at the combine?
I remember them being good numbers, not like off the charts, but I remember them being good from what I recall.
Quick search. This write-up was pre-combine, but 6'2", 198, arm length 30 and 1/8 inch, and hand size 9 and 5/8. So again, this was pre-combine.
Let me just look real quick. I can
so
find it in a second.
So that does kind of build. Does that seem similar to like a Puka build?
Oh, for sure. And I just think in general, you're talking about a kind of a guy who, yes, he's more raw because he didn't play the position, but we're talking about a guy whose dad was a very, very good NFL receiver. His brother is the best running back in the NFL. We're not talking about any guy who just barely has played the position.
Right. So, I'd say targeting Jerry Rice's son and, from the McCaffrey tree is never a bad idea here late in the draft with Brennan Rice and Luke McCaffrey. So don't hate that. But these are guys that we will get into more in the post NFL draft rankings, rookie ranking shows, especially with more context of where they landed. Go ahead. Did you have anything?
Sorry about that. I was just looking it up. He's 6'2", like 190. He ran a 4.46. Jumps were like 36, 37 inches. So good, solid numbers. Not like off the charts, but Nakua's numbers weren't like off the charts. It's like he's just so smooth and perfect route runner, perfect hands. He beats you that way.
Okay. So would that be one of your comps for him?
I think it's a fair comp. Yeah. Fair comp.
That's a bold comp, big comp too, to replicate that kind of season. And obviously McCaffrey currently is going ADP 234. So you basically get him at the end of the big board draft. So this has been really helpful. Again, we're going to hit on some of these guys that we just mentioned in passing in more detail. And like I said, we'll be doing all these rankings all over again, but continue to check out these shows. They're nice evergreen shows that you can check out throughout this big board process. Steve has the quarterback rankings up, running back rankings should be up tomorrow. And then he'll be doing the other positions as well on fanspeak.com. So check that out. Again, one last time, if you're new to Underdog, use code FANSPEAK for a 100% deposit bonus. They got baseball drafts. They got NBA playoff drafts. Of course, you can do the early football drafts, and then we'll be covering a very detailed best ball season of rankings, articles, strategy shows, live drafts, you name it, interviews. We're going to have it all. And we're very, very excited for all of that. So this has been fun doing this. And coming up, we will start to do some live drafts, do some live big boards, do some live rookie sophomores when it comes out, some strategy shows. So stay tuned here to the FanSpeak Network. Be sure to like and subscribe on your way out. So thank you guys so much for joining us. For Steve, I'm Meg, and we will see you next time.